El Saga Deshaun. SHAUN. Deshaun Watson. Let's talk Deshaun Watson. Let's talk NFL quarterbacks real fast. Try to keep this under 5 minutes. What a lot of people are getting mixed up, I think, in my opinion, is they're not taking into account when they're discussing what Matthew Stafford is worth in relation to Deshaun Watson. There's a lot of intricacies involved in that deal that is getting overlooked, I think, or one specific intricacy in particular. And that is that extra first-round pick that you see that the Rams basically dealt in exchange for Matthew Stafford in that deal, right, is more or less an incentive to the Lions to take on that gaudy contract, right? So now, obviously, the Lions, they have some sort of long-term plan for Jared Goff if they're willing to consume that amount of cap space that's devoted specifically to one player. But they're also being compensated with an extra first-round pick because of it. So I want to applaud the Rams first and foremost for basically going against conventional wisdom and kind of doing things differently than what history says is the right thing to do from an NFL perspective, okay? And so one of those things being, they do not have, after this deal was done, they now do not have another first round pick until I believe 2024. So since they drafted Jared Goff 1 overall back in 2016, they haven't had a first round pick since then. And so that's another thing to think about is Sean McVay didn't draft Jared Goff. That wasn't his guy. And so now he's basically hand selected this experienced veteran in Matthew Stafford and says, hey, I want that guy. I don't care what it takes to go get him. We're going to get him and we're going to go compete for a Super Bowl, right? And that's so awesome to see, right? It's like the NFL should be, or at least the NFC West in particular, should be a little bit worried about that, because now all of a sudden Sean McVay has his guy. And we're talking about 2 years ago, this team is competing in the Super Bowl, right? And so, again, back to the going against the grain and against conventional wisdom. 2 years ago, when Sean McVay kind of burst onto the scene of the NFL, he revolutionized the personnel packaging display, right? They were strictly an 11 personnel offense, which means they at most had one tight end on the field for literally, I think it was like 100% of their plays. They never had any 2 tight end sets, and they basically ran through the league until Bill Belichick stopped them in the Super Bowl. So anyways, just wanted to say, like, the Rams understand how important the quarterback position is, and it doesn't matter what you have to do to go out and get your guy, what you have to pay to go get your guy. You just got to go get him. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is Deshaun Watson. There is no price tag. There is no. There's no history showing what kind of deal a player of his caliber can garner. Because it hasn't ever happened. It shouldn't ever happen, right? And I don't want it to happen, because my biggest fear is that the NFL loses the number one, the single biggest and most important thing that it has going for it as a sport, and that's the parity of it, how difficult it is to win. And so the last thing I want to see is this trend of quarterbacks basically forcing their will upon teams and just going to other markets, other teams, other organizations that they want to be in. All right, guys, gonna try to wrap this all up and bring it back full circle. I had to do an actual cut this time, I think for the first time ever in any of these videos on this channel. I was late for my tea time yesterday, but anyways, bringing it all back full circle to my point about what I fear the most regarding this whole Deshaun situation is the parity, right? That the NFL could potentially lose on, or lose out on, or struggle with. That's the number one thing, the number one quality, that the appeal that league has over any other league, in my opinion, is because the salary cap and just the talent distribution, it's so even, it's so equal. Like, most of the time, there's really between 6 to 8 true championship contenders in any given NFL season, like teams that can actually make a Super Bowl run. But on any given Sunday, any team can go beat you, regardless of what's happening, within your roster and all that stuff. So, this is the same NFL that has seen the Eagles, go from potential dynasty to organizational dysfunction and new head coach and quarterback controversy and all this stuff. And the same NFL that, kind of tying back the Rams back into this Rams team was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And now, so again, credit to the Rams. Like they say the heck with what's normal, that, we don't care. We're going to do things our way. We're going to go against conventional wisdom. Like, guys, this team last year, this past season, the one that still has 1 week left, this Rams team with a banged up Jared Goff, who could barely grip a football. They benched him for the week before against the Seahawks for John Wolford, a guy who hadn't ever made an NFL start before, right? This team is one game away from the NFC Championship game. The very same team that's 50 plus or so million, some odd million in dead cap from two guys who are no longer on their team, and Brandon Cooks and Todd Gurley. The very same team that's quarterbacked by a guy, Jared Goff, who Sean McVay has pretty much openly disrespected, and I don't hate him for it. He's kind of being honest about it, but it was no secret to hear them talk about how they pretty much more or less said Jared Goff isn't in our long-term plan. And I was happy to hear that, because it kind of confirmed what I had already thought for the last 2 years. But you watch these games, these Ram games, and Sean McVay is taking this guy to a Super Bowl who can't even barely throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field. I think if you look at his ADOT, his average depth of target, he's throwing the ball like behind the line of scrimmage more than anybody. And that's not what Sean McVay wants to do. That's what he has to do because of the quarterback limitations. And so now he's identified his guy, Matthew Stafford. That's why I think that the Rams have to be a favorite in the NFC next year. And so it's just going to be exciting to see how that all plays out now that Sean McVay's got a guy who can actually stretch the field vertically, as well as, a little bit more mobile with those play action boots that he likes to incorporate and all that stuff, right? Establishing the run game, getting all that going. But they have that vertical element now in the passing game that's really going to, I think, make this offense come together and finally get back to that Super Bowl caliber level, the level that it was at before they were stymied by, the one and only Bill Belichick in the Super Bowl, right? So, again, tying all this back in, Deshaun Watson, this whole thing hits home for me because it's a similar situation that what the Cowboys are finding themselves in right now. And, I can think back to 2 summers ago when I'm in New York for my baseball season, and I'm catching heat for saying that the Cowboys weren't crazy for the rumors came out that they were considering $27.5 million per year. And I was so elated by that. I was happy because it showed me that the Cowboys saw what I saw and were willing to commit to a quarterback who at the time was literally, it was probably 80-20 of the fan base in favor or against him, not in favor of keeping him around long term. So, I was out here defending this guy 2 years ago whenever they were offering him, or reportedly discussing a contract extension worth $27.5 million per year. And now, obviously that number is 40 or so roughly now, because the 20% increase from the franchise tag that he was, paid last year, that was $31.4 million. 20% increase if you're to franchise him the second time, that brings it to about $38 million. That's where the negotiation starts. So that's the whole thing. It's like this whole Deshaun thing, it hits home because here I am sitting here criticizing the Houston Texans for being completely dysfunctional and ruining the best thing that's ever happened to their organization in Deshaun Watson. And to me, that just brings everything full circle for me. because I'm sitting here, you know, and it doesn't necessarily feel like it, but in a way, the Cowboys are doing the same exact thing. So I can't wait. I hope that this deal ends up getting done, but that's why I'm so passionate about it, is because I feel the Texans' pain. My buddy Dave McHugh, Coach Q, I was telling him, you know, he 3 weeks ago, I'm sitting here, I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. You're not going to have to worry about Deshaun leaving. It's just not possible. A player of his caliber, at the quarterback position, a franchise guy who's in the prime of his career, they don't leave their organization. It just doesn't happen. And so for an organization like the Houston Texans to screw that up, it's mind-boggling to me. So, you know, I feel for you, Dave. Like, if this guy, it seems like he's really forcing his way out, which it sucks, because there's really not much the Texans can do except for trade him. And so now, you know, people think that this is Deshaun Watson throwing, you know, a little hissy fit about the Texans not asking him about who they were going to bring in as their head coach or GM or whatever, right? They bring in Nick Caserio over from the Patriots organization, and that's kind of when we start to hear the rumblings of him being unhappy and unsatisfied. But what people don't see is the bigger picture. This all started a long time ago. This all started when they traded away Deshaun's best weapon for a second-round pick and a running back that's oft injured. You know, it started then. It started when you take away, you're handicapping your franchise player and trading away his favorite target, who's a top 3, top 4 receiver in the league. That's how this whole thing starts. And then when, you know, ownership, Cal McNair comes in and says, hey, you know, Deshaun, we want you to be a part of this roster building process, you know, getting things lined up and back on up to par within the executive offices, right? And then he's not even involved in that. So it's like these are self-inflicted wounds, not by Deshaun Watson. You know, and he's not owed anything. He's not owed the right to, you know, have a say in who they're hiring. That's not his job per se, but you know, you want to be on the same page with the most important player in your organization. And if you're saying things, making these promises that you can't live up to, yeah, it's no wonder why things are progressing the way they are right now. It's no wonder why he's unhappy and why you're potentially getting ready to lose the best thing that's ever happened to you. That's your fault, Texans. So that's where I'm at on that. To me, another thing too is people are saying now that we've seen the oh, by the way, talk about parity. This Texans team, you guys might have forgot, a year ago, little over a year ago, I think it was the divisional round, Chiefs versus Texans. This Texans squad has a 24-0 lead on what now looks to be the makings of the best dynasty in NFL history, with the Chiefs securing Patrick Mahomes long term, right? It seems like as long as that guy's upright, they're going to be contenders. And the Houston Texans had a 24-0 lead on them with 8 minutes and change left to go in the second quarter. And now where are we? We're 4-12. Our quarterback has an MVP caliber season, but we have nobody around him to help. We're 4-12, and now we're about to lose him too. So it just baffles me that you can even, as an organization, let things get to this point. And if you read, his name's going to slip my mind right now. A columnist down in Houston, a beat writer for them. He came on 105 through the Fan pretty recently. I believe it was the G-Bag Nation guys, Jeff Kavanaugh, Gavin Dawson, and Brian Broaddus, and basically told the whole story and laid it out there like this guy, Jack Easterby, is coming in and essentially ruining the organization from within. It's like almost self-sabotage level. And so I feel Deshaun's pain now, because he doesn't want out because they didn't let him have a hand in who they hired as their general manager. He wants out because he sees the organizational dysfunction that's happening and unfolding before his eyes. So there's so much background stuff that's not even being taken into account and consideration, and we're just scolding this player for wanting better for himself, and I can't blame him for it. But yeah, it does suck to think about the potential rebound effect that this is going to have across the league. And I think we were having this conversation with Chris, and it's literally, this is just to kind of explain, Chris and Hunter Sands, it's like, this is to explain kind of how I feel about it. It's like, he goes, I can't wait to see what happens with this whole Deshaun thing. And I'm like, dude, as crazy, like, I agree, I can't wait either, but we're not just going to see it. We're going to feel it. Like, you will feel the earthquake beneath your feet when this deal happens. And so now moving over kind of along to like the deal and what he's worth, right? I talked about earlier, there is no number. There is no like tangible evidence or document that you point to and say, okay, this is what a quarterback is worth. It's like they're invaluable because they're so valuable. You can't put a specific price tag on it. And that goes back to my whole Dak argument too, right? I'll save that again. But the Texans, if Matthew Stafford is worth a first-round pick, a third-round pick, and, whatever else, right? Because, again, I talked about the contract that Jared Goff was owed and due, 4 million or 4 years and in excess of $100 million. They paid an extra first-round pick to the Lions to basically take on that contract for him. So they're like, hey, do us a favor. We'll give you an extra first-round pick. They don't care because, in the Rams' mind, those first-round picks are, like I said, NFC contenders. So if you're an NFC contender, and let's say the Rams get to the NFC Championship next year, well, guess what? That first-round pick that they just traded to the Lions, it's going to be, 27, 28, 29, something like that, or later. It's going to be one of the final 4 picks in the first round. And if you pay attention to the draft and all the scouts out there, they'll tell you on any given draft year, there's maybe 14 to 17 true first-round grades on any, in totality. So really, if you're picking outside of the top 17 on any given year, maybe the top 20 if you're lucky, you're not really getting first round talent. So that's what the Rams think, that like they're a little bit ahead of the curve in that regard. Like, again, they're saying to themselves, we know what we're capable of with this defense, where we just almost were with a more or less inept quarterback, for lack of a better term, and then 40 plus million in dead money for between 2 players that are no longer here. If our guru head coach, offensive mind, can go out and get his guy, which he has now, he's hand-selected Matthew Stafford. We know that too, that this was his preferred choice in the open market. What's the sky is the limit with these guys. So first-round pick, third-round pick, that's essentially what Matthew Stafford was worth. So what does that mean for Deshaun Watson? Well, that means that at age 25, 7 years younger than Matthew Stafford, better numbers, more mobile, 3 first-round picks, 4 first-round picks, 5, 7 picks total, maybe, 3 to 4 firsts and 3 to 4 seconds. Like, what I'm getting at is his worth is more than any team should and will be able to give up. So now I still am not fully convinced that he makes his way out, but I don't see how the Texans salvage this relationship. So it feels like their hand is going to be forced. And they're going to have to just get something in return. Otherwise, this is just something that's going to keep getting worse and worse. And I see a point of no return, as opposed to a light at the end of the tunnel here for them. So I think I'm probably leaving something out that I wanted to really hit on, but the bottom line is, when you have a quarterback, you do whatever it takes to make sure that you don't lose him. It is the single most valuable position in all of sports, and it is one position where they mentally, psychologically, emotionally, they never stop getting better, ever. So a lot of times you're paying a player for what they can become and for where you project them to be, not for what they are now or what they already have done. And we've seen that growth each successive year with Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, all these guys, Josh Allen. You can't put a price tag on a guy like that, and you damn sure can't ruin it whenever the opportunity comes to secure them and have that cornerstone piece long term. And I think I'll close with this. The last thing I wanted to say is first round picks, all this stuff. It all sounds great come around draft time when you're no longer competing for a Super Bowl, and so now all of a sudden, first round draft picks, draft capital becomes the Lombardi Trophy for the teams that are no longer in contention, right? It's gold. But the problem is when you let a guy like that go, like Deshaun Watson, I think he either ends up in New York as a Jet or in Miami, because both of those two teams, similarly to the deal that we saw with Stafford and Goff, right? They have quarterbacks to return or to offer in exchange. So it lessens the load of the amount of draft capital that you're going to have to give up. So, if he goes to Miami, Tua's likely packaged in that deal. And if he goes to New York to the Jets, who we also know Deshaun Watson, that's based on what the columnist from Houston said, is his preferred destination because of the relationship and expectation he has for Robert Saleh. Apparently he really, really likes Robert Saleh. So I can see that being a deal. But again, the Jets can offer Sam Darnold. And what we know now is, I think Albert Breer tweeted this, since 2009, there have been 22 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Only one of those guys remains with his team that drafted him, and that's Carson Wentz, and he's on the way out, it seems like. So the point is this, and I've hit on this in the past too, quarterbacks are so hard to come by. When you find that stability, you do everything you can to secure it long term, because you never know when that opportunity is going to happen again. Look at the Browns. They spent almost 2 decades looking for their next quarterback. It happens. And there's so many teams that are in turmoil on a year in, year out basis because they don't have that guy to rely on. And now the Texans and the Cowboys do, and it feels like they're just doing everything they can to screw it up, and it pisses me off. So I think, I think that's it. That's all I got.